Hello, and welcome to this pre-recorded event for GCE Psychology 2015 specification, focusing on topics 5 to 9, which is Year 2 of the A-Level. Year 1 of the A-Level also makes up the AS course with 2 exceptions. Some of the maths requirements are not for AS, and the issues and debates are not for AS. There is a separate pre-recorded event for topics 1 to 4, which is Year 1 of the A-Level and also is the AS. This presentation will address the new GCE Psychology specifications for first teaching from September 2015. Just the A-Level specification, because it focuses on Year 2 material. The structure and content of the specification will be considered, as well as assessment of the new A-Level qualification, including some exemplar material to support you in applying the new mark schemes for topics 5 to 9. There will also be an exploration of possible teaching and delivery strategies for the new qualification. To help you get the most out of this session, you may want to have the following documents handy, as we will refer to them throughout. These are the A-Level specification, Component Guides 2 and 3, and the A-Level Sample Assessment Materials, SAMs. We will use A-Level Papers 2 and 3, SAMs. There are 3 schemes of work on the Edexcel website, one for the AS, one for co-teaching the AS and A-Level, and a linear A-Level scheme of work. Having the linear A-Level scheme of work would be useful, as it is referred to, the second year of the A-Level being the focus of this presentation. However, the SAMs are large documents, as are the component guides and the scheme of work, and you might be accessing these online. If you cannot have them nearby during this presentation, that is fine. The aims and objectives of this event are for you to consider the structure, content, and assessment of this new qualification, and the support available to guide you through the A-Level. The aim is also for you to explore possible teaching and delivery strategies for the new qualifications, focusing on Year 2, including issues and debates. Exemplar material is also offered to support you in applying the new mark schemes for topics 5 to 9. The presentation starts with looking at the A-Level qualification and its structure. Then, after a very brief summary of Year 1, which is also the AS, there is a look at Year 2, topics 5 to 9, content. After that, assessment in general is looked at, along with related issues, such as looking at the assessment objectives and the format of the exam papers. Teaching, delivery and resources are then explored, before coming back to some more assessment issues and to help in preparing students for the exams. The GCE Psychology specification has general aims, which help you to understand the structure and content of the specification. These aims come from the subject criteria, an off-call document that can be accessed using the link shown on the slide if you want to know more. These aims focus on students' understanding of different areas of psychology and how they relate to one another, as well as appreciating skills involved in doing psychology and having an understanding of scientific methods. Aims also include students developing competence and confidence in maths and method skills, as well as developing an interest in and an enthusiasm for the subject. It is also important for students to appreciate how society uses the sciences, including economic issues around that. Year 2 of the specification draws on Year 1 understanding. For example, The neurotransmitter explanation of schizophrenia uses understanding of synaptic transmission, which was covered in biological psychology. Method in Year 2 also draws on Year 1 methods, such as interviewing in clinical psychology and using experiments if you choose criminological psychology. Year 2 is to help to give an appreciation of psychology, to improve skills and confidence in doing psychology, and to develop an interest in the subject by focusing on applying psychology. Applications relate to society in that they tend to focus on understanding issues for individuals in a society, and then putting forward ideas about treatments, then implementing treatments. The structure and content of the specification is looked at next. The basics of the GCE Psychology specification are 9 topic areas. A-level students study 7 topic areas. Topics 6, 7 and 8 are choices, and a student covers just one of them. Topics 1 to 4 are covered in A-level Year 1, and the AS comprises topics 1 to 4, with 2 exceptions. Topics 1 to 4 and the AS are focused on in a different presentation. Topic Area 1 is Social Psychology. Topic Area 2 is Cognitive Psychology. Topic Area 3 is Biological Psychology. Topic Area 4 is Learning Theories. Topics 5 to 9 are covered in Year 2 of the A-level. Topic Area 5 is Clinical Psychology, and all students cover this application. Topic Areas 6, 7 and 8 involve 3 applications, which are Criminological, Child and Health Psychology. A student covers just one of these 3 applications. Topic Area 9 is Psychological Skills. This is a synoptic topic, which is revision in essence, because it draws together what A-level students have covered through their course in relation to method and studies. Also, Topic Area 9 is where the issues and debates are found. More is said about issues and debates and Topic 9 later in this event. Topics 5 to 9 are covered in this presentation. A different presentation focuses on Topics 1 to 4. Within each topic area, there is a specific structure, except for Topic 9, the synoptic topic. All topic areas, except for Topic 9, have the same structure. All start with some content, then methods, then studies, a key question, and a practical investigation. We then come to issues and debates. Issues and debates are separate from the topic areas, in that they are added to the end of each. This is intended to illustrate how to thread them through the specification, rather than saying that they must be taught at the end of each topic area. They can be taught as is preferred, and they belong in Topic Area 9. More is said about this later in this presentation, when Topic 9 is discussed. Here is an overview of the specification, to summarize what has been said so far, before we go on to look more at the content itself and at Year 2 in particular. For the A-level, there are 3 exam papers, as you can see looking at the bottom table on this slide. Paper 1 focuses on topics 1 to 4, social, cognitive and biological psychology, and learning theories. This paper assesses foundations of psychology, which is what topics 1 to 4 are called. Paper 2 focuses on topics 5 to 8. These are clinical psychology, and then one subject chosen from criminological, child, and health psychology, This paper covers applications of psychology, which is what topics 5 to 8 are called. Paper 3 focuses on topic 9, which is the synoptic revision paper, Psychological Skills. This covers a review of methods covered through the course, a review of studies, and the issues and debates part of the course. Importantly, all 3 papers are taken at the end of the course. This means students will have covered all the material before they come to papers 1, 2, and 3. Therefore, it's worth noting that they can be asked issues and debates questions in paper 1 and paper 2, as well as paper 3. More about assessment is covered later in this presentation. Foundations of psychology comprise social, cognitive, and biological psychology, and learning theories. AS involves just these 4 topic areas. Theories covered in Year 1 of the A-Level include 4 theories of memory in cognitive psychology, social identity theory in social psychology, and synaptic transmission in biological psychology. Other theories covered include classical and operant conditioning and social learning theory in learning theories. Method is covered in Year 1 of the A-Level, including interview, questionnaire, experiment, observation, content analysis, and the use of animals in research in psychology. Year 2 of the A-Level draws on the foundations that are covered in Year 1, as shown in the next slide. This slide looks at how Year 1 material relates to Year 2. Clinical psychology. This covers non-biological explanations for mental disorders, which can be social explanations for schizophrenia, so social psychology is involved. Also, a treatment might be CBT, which draws on cognitive psychology and learning theories. A biological treatment can be drug therapy, which draws on biological psychology. Regarding methods, interviewing is considered, which was covered in social psychology. Also, the analysis of quantitative data using descriptive and inferential statistics is reviewed, and thematic analysis drawn on for analysis of qualitative data. These method issues are covered in Year 1. Criminological psychology. This covers social explanations of crime, such as labeling and self-fulfilling prophecy, and can include social learning, drawing on learning theories. Biological explanations are required as well, including brain functioning, which reflects what was learned in biological psychology. Cognitive interviewing and issues about eyewitness memory relate to cognitive psychology, such as reconstructive memory. Factors relating to juror decision-making also consider memory. BPS ethical guidelines, first looked at in social psychology, are reviewed. The focus on experiments builds on what was learned in cognitive psychology. Sampling is in this application, drawing on social psychology, where it was first met, and analysis of data draws on Year 1 learning, except for grounded theory relating to analysis of qualitative data. Child psychology. Biological explanations of autism, as well as non-biological explanations, which can include cognitive ideas, are required and relate to Year 1 underpinning. Learning theories are useful when discussing the effects of upbringing on child development. Questionnaire and interview were first looked at in social psychology, and observation looked at in learning theories. Analysis of data draws on Year 1 learning except for grounded theory relating to analysis of qualitative data. Health psychology. Cognitive psychology can be used to understand therapies such as CBT. Learning theories can be used to explain drug taking and also considered as therapy, such as aversion therapy. Biological psychology is used a lot to explain drug taking and so on, and how drugs work in the brain is part of biological psychology, so built on in health psychology. The use of animals was covered in learning theories and ethics too, as well as being covered in social psychology. The same issues arise for the analysis of quantitative and qualitative data as in the other applications in Year 2. You can see that Year 1 foundations of psychology are built upon in Year 2 quite a bit. The focus in Year 2 is on applying the foundations and in applying the methods learned about in Year 1 as well. Psychological skills. This is a bit different because it is a synoptic topic and a synoptic exam paper. All of the method, except for the optional application, is reviewed in Topic 9, so all of Year 1 methodology is involved. All the classic studies are reviewed as part of this topic, so again all of Year 1 classic studies are involved, as well as contemporary studies. The third section in Topic 9 is Issues and Debates. These are given in all the other topic areas to show how they fit, and candidates draw on other areas, including Year 1, to discuss issues and debates. You can see that Topic 9 involves revision of a lot of material from both Year 1 and Year 2. The idea of Topic 9 is that it is a revision topic, to help students to bring the course together before sitting any of their A-level exams. This slide covers briefly what is in the Year 2 of the A-level. You can see the structure of each topic area, as was explained earlier in this presentation. Areas include content, methods, studies, a choice of key question, and a practical for each of the topics. Issues and debates are missed off this slide, although they do feature in the 4 applications. There is more about issues and debates later to explain where they fit in the course. It is worth looking at the different parts in the structure for each application, though of course you will choose one from criminological, child, and health psychology to go with clinical psychology. Clinical psychology. The content, briefly, is about diagnosis, including the DSM and the ICD. It also covers schizophrenia and one other disorder from unipolar depression, OCD and anorexia nervosa. The 2 disorders covered include looking at features and symptoms, explanations and treatments. The methods include some ethics, interviews, case studies, and a list of methods that are not included elsewhere, including longitudinal and cross-sectional designs. Cross-cultural methods are new here too, but they are also in child and health psychology, if you choose those options. Meta-analysis is another method required. All of the applications review the analysis of quantitative data, including descriptive and inferential statistics. They also review analysis of qualitative data, including thematic analysis and adding grounded theory. Studies are Rosenhan, 1973, on being sane in insane places as the classic study, with Carlson et al., 1999, a review of neurotransmitter explanations of schizophrenia as the study for schizophrenia. Then, one more study is needed from a choice of 2, depending on which other disorder you choose. There is a key question as usual, and a practical, which must be a content analysis focusing on mental health issues. Criminological psychology. The content, briefly, is Causes of Crime, Understanding the Offender, which looks at cognitive and ethical interviewing, as well as formulation, and treatments of crime. There is also eyewitness memory and juror decision-making. The methods focus on experiments relating to eyewitness memory, as well as case studies. Sampling is reviewed, as are evaluative issues like reliability and validity. As with other applications, analysis of data features. Studies are Loftus and Palmer, 1974, as the classic study, with one contemporary study from a choice of 3. One contemporary study is a field study, looking at eyewitness identification. One focuses on jury decision-making, and the other is about brief anger management as a therapy. So they all suit the application. There is a key question, as usual, and a practical, giving a choice of 3 research methods: questionnaire, interview, or experiment. Child psychology. Content involves deprivation, privation, and attachment, including cross-cultural focus on attachment. There is a focus on advantages and disadvantages of daycare. Features, explanations, and therapies for autism are required. Method includes questionnaire, interview, and observation, as well as cross-cultural research and ethics relating to researching with children. As with other applications, analysis of data features. Studies include Van IJzendoorn and Cronenberg, 1988, a meta-analysis of patterns of attachments across cultures, as well as the classic study and one contemporary study from a choice of 3. One study follows on from the classic study, looking at attachments across cultures. One looks at daycare, and one looks at problems regarding international adoption. So they all suit the application. There is a key question as usual, and a practical, giving a choice of 3 research methods: questionnaire, interview, or observation. Health psychology. The content covers drug misuse, including factors about drug abuse such as addiction and withdrawal. Explanations of drug abuse are considered, as well as treatments for drug addiction. One anti-drug campaign is required. Method covers the use of animals when studying drugs, and related ethics, as well as 2 research methods using humans to study drugs and related ethics. Cross-cultural research is also required. Studies include Olds and Milner, 1954, as the classic study, and their focus on the pleasure center in the brain, as well as one contemporary study from a choice of 3. One looks at peers and alcohol use. One looks at why alcohol is drunk in India, such as social issues, and another looks at a brief treatment for alcohol misuse. So they all suit the application. There is a key question as usual, and a practical, giving a choice of 3 research methods: questionnaire, interview, or content analysis. Considering delivery and teaching, it is worth noting that the aim is for students to make links when learning content, methods, studies, key question, and practical in one topic area. They do not have to study each aspect separately. For example, using clinical psychology as an example, the neurotransmitter functioning explanation of schizophrenia can possibly be used for one of the other disorders, such as depression, though different neurotransmitter. This is explained well in the required study, Carlson et al., 1999, and can help to explain drug therapy as a treatment for schizophrenia. Of course, the course can be taught in any way that is preferred, including choosing to go section by section. There is a course planner, which gives an outline of how the course could be taught, and also schemes of work. These are accessible using the Edexcel website. The schemes of work have quite a bit of detail, including teaching ideas. And there are schemes of work for the AS, for co-teaching the AS A-level, and for a linear A-level. The course planner and schemes of work are in Word format on the website, as well as in PDF, so you can edit them to suit your needs. More about the free resources on the Edexcel website is considered in a later slide. Having looked at what is required in the applications, which are topics 5 to 8, and a student covers topic 5 with one from topics 6 to 8, psychological skills is covered next, to show what is required there. Topic 9, Psychological Skills, has 3 sections. The first section reviews method. This has been covered in the A-level specification in topics 1 to 5. There is a complete list in topic 9 of the method required, and students will revise what they have covered. An aim is to help with revision and to help to draw all the methodology together to help it click for students. The second section looks at studies that a student has covered in the A-level course. As classic studies are covered by all students, it is useful to review them. It would also be worth revising all the contemporary studies chosen. The third section is the Issues and Debates section, and is synoptic. Students will be expected to be able to discuss the issues and debates. These are listed and discussed next in this presentation. An Issues and Debates question can be found on A-level papers 1 and 2 as well. Psychological Skills is in a way a revision paper, which should help students. They will complete their course and revise using topic 9, and then sit all 3 A-level exams. This will help them with all 3 exam papers, as they can enrich their answers as appropriate, including being able to discuss issues and debates. Issues and debates are considered next, before looking at resources to support teaching of this A-level. In the A-level course, there are 11 issues and debates that come from what students are required to know and understand in the subject content for A-level psychology. There are some issues and debates that relate well to methodology. These are practical issues in design and implementation of research, reductionism, psychology as science, and nature-nurture. Some issues and debates are more about the subject matter of psychology. These are culture and gender, comparisons between ways of explaining behavior using different themes, and the use of psychological knowledge within society. The understanding of how psychological understanding has developed over time also fits quite well here. 3 issues are about ethics. These are ethics, issues of social control, and issues related to socially sensitive research. There are other ways of sorting the issues and debates. This is just one way of understanding them. The issues and debates come from the subject content that the Department for Education requires. Students are expected to have an overview of psychology, and these 11 issues are important, so they are highlighted in this special way. They are also a way of threading an overview throughout the course, so that while students are learning in a linear manner, going through the 4 foundation topics and their 2 applications, they can see that there are these overarching themes or issues and debates. Where the issues and debates are covered in the course is a choice. They can be covered right at the end and used to go back through the course to help with revision. Alternatively, they can be covered at the end of each topic to help to understand the topic and the issues and debates, so that they become familiar and related to the different topics. There can also be some combination of these two suggestions, such as covering issues and debates at the end of Year 1, before going on to the applications, and then from the start of Year 2, threading them through. Having considered the specification structure and content, as well as, briefly, delivery ideas around issues and debates, assessment issues are now considered, before looking at more about teaching and delivery and resources. We will then look further at assessment using example answers. Firstly, an important slide is shown here, which shows the assessment objectives for Science A-levels, in this case, psychology. Assessment objectives are called AOs for short. A main difference from GCE 2008 is in AO2 and AO3, such as theoretical and practical context, AO2, and the emphasis on refining practical design, AO3. AO1 is, as it was before, about knowledge and understanding, including of scientific ideas, processes, techniques, and procedures, which suits any assessment of knowledge and understanding, including research methodology. Though in the 2008 specifications, AO1 did not include knowledge and understanding of method issues, it does now. AO2 is about applying and using knowledge and understanding, including when handling both qualitative and quantitative data, and the application of scientific ideas, processes, techniques, and procedures. Whenever a student applies what they know to a scenario they have not prepared, they meet AO2. AO3 focuses on analysis and evaluation, including making judgments and reaching conclusions, as well as developing and refining practical design and procedures. Implications for assessment include that, for the A-level, the 3 assessment objectives are split into about 1/3 of each for each examination. This means that an exam paper is going to have questions focusing on 1/3, approximately, of AO2, which is quite a bit of application of their ideas, which is worth noting. AO2 requires students to show they can apply what they know, both theory and method, focusing on both qualitative and quantitative data. You can expect a lot of stimulus questions where a scenario is offered and the students have to apply their knowledge and understanding to the scenario. This can be applying what they know about the practice or the theory of psychology. AO3 requires students to develop and refine practical design and procedures, so expect some assessment of their ability to improve research. That is something that could be practiced, including being part of their practical investigations. AO3 also requires evaluation, analysis, and interpretation, which is usual in A-level psychology. However, for the 2015 specification, there is a requirement to make judgments and reach conclusions. This means terms have that requirement within them. More about injunctions is given in a short while in this presentation, to explain this point about making judgments and reaching conclusions, and how an injunction signals that this is necessary. The A-level comprises 3 externally assessed components. Paper 1 and Paper 2 assess the distinct areas of the qualification content, with Paper 1 assessing the foundations of psychology content, and Paper 2 assessing the application of psychology content. Paper 3 is the psychology skills part of the A-level, reviewing methodology, reviewing studies and covering issues and debates that have been threaded through the specification. There is no multiple choice in the papers. They use short answer and extended writing questions. Each paper lasts 2 hours. Papers 1 and 2 have 90 marks, and Paper 3 has 80 marks, which gives more reading and planning time. Paper 3 is a revision paper in a way, as it is synoptic, so students will be well prepared for Papers 1 and 2 at the end of their course. 30% of their A-level marks, Paper 3, focuses on their revision, as well as their synoptic skills. Papers 1 and 2 comprise 35% each of the A-level. This slide looks at injunctions. Appendix 6 in the specification, pages 77 to 78, gives the injunctions that will be used. Injunctions that tend to ask AO1 questions include describe, give, complete, define, name, and state. Others in the list can also be used to ask for AO1 skills. For AO1, only 10% of the questions must ask for pure recall, so injunctions like explain will be used, alongside injunctions asking for pure recall, as explain does not involve just pure recall, it asks for a point, and then a justification of that point. Injunctions that tend to focus on AO2 include discuss, compare, calculate, plot, predict, suggest, and possibly analyze or justify. Others in the list can also be used to ask for AO2 skills. Possibly is used here, as it depends on the question. Analysis of data presented in a question would be AO2, for example. As was said when considering the assessment objectives for the course, students will be applying their knowledge and understanding by responding to stimulus materials. When they apply what they know to a novel situation or a novel idea, that will be AO2. With regard to AO3, injunctions need to be those that ask for judgments and conclusions, which are clear in Appendix 6. These include explain, evaluate, assess, and to what extent. Students can study Appendix 6 so that they know what they are being asked to do in each question. Probably a lot of the injunctions do not need to be covered, such as give. So just those that need to be clear to a student, such as evaluate, need to be discussed. One way of helping students to know what a question requires is to use the injunctions in homework questions, as is suggested in a little while in the presentation. Having looked at the specification structure and content, and at assessment issues, including some ideas for teaching and delivery, more teaching and delivery ideas are now covered, mainly by focusing on the free resources available. After this section, more is given about assessment, including some exemplar materials, before ending this presentation. There are resources for GCE psychology, links for which are found on the Edexcel website. In the website section, Teaching and Learning Materials, you will find an editable course planner for AS and A-level, as well as editable schemes of work. There are AS, A-level, and co-teachable schemes of work. The schemes of work give a week-by-week plan for content to cover, including ideas and suggested resources. The linear scheme of work is for the A-level alone, without the AS. Regarding the schemes of work, they are planned to stretch over about 34 weeks in a year, focusing on about 4.5 hours teaching a week. Of course, you may not have that time available. Students doing 3 A-levels and perhaps an AS, if 4.5 hours a week are available, in their first year have 18 hours of lessons. For a full-time student, more hours could be expected. Perhaps 26 hours is not an unreasonable amount a week. So, a Year 1 A-level student can offer 2 hours additional study time for psychology, and a Year 2 A-level student can offer around 4 extra hours a week. Homework could take care of some of the material to ease the time pressure regarding getting through the material. There are video resources which are voiceovers on different aspects of the course. There are 4 voiceovers. One is on the A-level in general, one on co-teaching AS and A-level, one on practical investigations, and one on the maths element of the A-level and AS courses. A mapping document helps to move from 2008 specifications, including those of other awarding bodies. There is also mathematical guidance. A main set of resources are 3 component guides, which have references to the studies, links to help with teaching, and other resources. Last but not least, there is a Getting Started guide. In these resources, you will find a lot of teaching ideas, including URLs and references for the studies, and URLs linking to different content areas. There are also ideas for key questions, as well as ideas about the practical investigations. A look at the content pages of the documents should guide you to what you need. This is a short example from the Linear A-level scheme of work, showing that you have some content suggested and some suggested resources. This is just a small example to give the idea of what is available. This one focuses on clinical psychology. An example focusing on criminological psychology follows. The content here is about the features and symptoms of schizophrenia. Another disorder, chosen from unipolar depression, OCD, and anorexia nervosa, is also required, with features and symptoms. So you can use ideas from that material as well. Perhaps part of the video Beautiful Minds would be suitable for schizophrenia. Or you could develop some sorting cards. You could have cards for schizophrenia and your other disorder, so students sorted the different disorders out, for example. Hopefully this gives you an idea of what is given in the schemes of work, and you will find the ideas helpful. Here is another example from the linear scheme of work, focusing on criminological psychology and the classic study, which takes in eyewitness testimony as well. You can also include misinformation as part of looking at post-event information. You could use a study template for all the studies. There are similar ideas for child and health psychology in the schemes of work. References and links for the classic and contemporary studies are found in the relevant component guide. Component Guide 1 focuses on A-level Paper 1 and the 2 AS papers. Component Guide 2 focuses on the applications in Paper 2, and Component Guide 3 focuses on Paper 3, Psychological Skills. This is an example from Component Guide 2 to show the sort of material that is there. This slide gives the reference for Carlson et al., 1999. Carlson et al. 1999 is the compulsory contemporary study for schizophrenia. Another contemporary study is also required, which is chosen from two relating to the chosen other disorder, unipolar depression, OCD, and anorexia nervosa. Note Carlson et al.'s 1999 paper was accepted in 1999, and that is the date used throughout in this specification, though the published date is 2000. This is the right article. On this slide is a URL from Component Guide 2 to the full journal article. When articles are immediately available online, this is indicated in the relevant component guide. Otherwise, an idea of how to find the article is given. Many are directly available. You will find all the studies covered in this way in the component guides. Component Guide 3 follows next. Here is a short example of materials in Component Guide 3. These relate to issues and debates, and you can see ideas for resourcing the issues and debates. Prior to this, in the guide, there is more detail regarding each issue and debate, and where there are links in the course to that issue and debate. Regarding understanding psychology changing over time, one of the issues and debates, this slide suggests a book on psychology changing over time, and gives a URL taking you to a relevant discussion. Regarding issues of social control, another issue and debate, this slide gives you an article for discussion and ideas relating to using therapies and treatments covered throughout the course as a means of discussing issues of social control. There is a Getting Started guide in the resources. This includes changes to the AS and A-level qualifications, including changes to the criteria and assessment objectives, which refer to the Department for Education and Ofqual changes. There is also material on changes to the Edexcel specification. A mapping document elsewhere in resources is helpful if you are changing from another awarding body. There is material on planning and delivery models, as well as a section on assessment guidance, including question types and taxonomy, injunctions. There is a section on the quantitative, maths, skills, listing areas where each skill is found, for example, and a section summarizing the issues and debates. Applications are presented in a linear format, with content, method, studies, key question, practical, and issues and debates in that order. However, teaching can be mixed to bring areas in as they occur in the teaching. For example, the neurotransmitter explanation of schizophrenia is the subject of Carlson et al.'s 1999 study, which is required as a contemporary study, so the two areas can be taught together. Drug therapy for schizophrenia, which can be the choice of biological treatment, can be taught alongside because it is understood through neurotransmitter functioning. What was covered in biological psychology is also relevant. Whilst looking at Carlson et al. 1999, there are also method issues that can be drawn out, such as using evidence from animal studies and from scanning. As in the content, methods in the applications draw on Year 1 foundations of psychology. The analysis of quantitative data is the same, to remind students to review how to use descriptive and inferential statistics to analyze quantitative data, including the 4 tests. The analysis of qualitative data does not add anything in the option applications, but in clinical psychology grounded theory, is added to the thematic analysis of Year 1 topics. Clinical psychology brings in some new issues regarding methods, including longitudinal and cross-sectional designs. Some of the applications bring in new methods, such as ethics, when researching with children in child psychology. Mainly, though, methods repeat in Year 2. What is important is to apply them. For example, in case studies, focus on clinical psychology and experiments looking at eyewitness testimony. When writing about a method relating to an application, students need to think about how the method is used in that application. So all examples should relate to the application, and any features of a method that are special should be considered, such as cross-cultural studies about attachment in child psychology, not cross-cultural studies in general. This is not to say that general information about a method cannot be used as well, such as what was learned about evaluation of a method in Year 1, for example, issues with self-report in interviews and questionnaires. Component Guide 3 gives teaching ideas for Paper 3. The Method section reviews all methodology covered in Topics 1 to 5. Use the list of methodology to draw up cards, worksheets, and/or to develop debates or groups working on different aspects of method, such as case studies versus experiments, or qualitative versus quantitative data. The Studies section is about reviewing studies, and classic studies, being covered by all, are a good place to focus. There could be an unseen study, and there could be focus on comparing studies, such as their methods or their ethics. Practice doing this. Using the issues and debates and the studies to illustrate them can be a good way of revising the Studies section. Also, using the list of evaluation points, reliability, validity, and so on, see page 5 of the specification, and for each finding, 2 classic and other studies that can illustrate them can be useful. The Issues and Debates section can be covered throughout the course, and notes made throughout against each issue and debate in preparation. Set up debates such as nature versus nurture, or find a case which suits and relate issues and debates to it. The idea of putting the issues and debates at the end of each topic and linking the topic to them was to help students to make links throughout, though the topic lists of issues and debates can be used at any time for the same purpose, including at the end of the course. Covering all the issues and debates at the end, even if also covered throughout, and going over all the methodology and the studies should help a great deal with revision, and with having a clear overview of psychology, which is the purpose of Paper 3, Psychological Skills. Having considered the specification structure and content, and assessment, and some teaching ideas including resources, we'll now consider some example answers to look more at assessment. In the papers, there will be points-based marking and levels marking. Both are briefly illustrated in the next few slides. You have the sample assessment materials, SAMs, to use as a basis for question setting and marking. One of the questions used here is from the A-Level Paper 2 in the SAMs, and one is from the A-Level Paper 3. Firstly, some information about levels marking. Here is some information about levels mark schemes. The slide that follows explains the AO split in the levels marks. A slide after that briefly gives a bit more explanation. All levels injunctions, marks, have their own mark scheme. This means, for example, that an 8-mark discuss question, focusing on AO1 and AO2, has its own mark scheme. You can find an example on page 49 of the A-Level SAMS, question 13. You can use this level's mark scheme for any homework questions you set, using discuss for 8 marks. This is one way for students to get used to what an injunction is asking for. As a teaching idea, for homework you could give them a worksheet with the homework question on it, and also the explanation of the injunction being used, from Appendix 6 in the specification, which gives all the injunctions, and how the marks are split, as well as the relevant generic mark scheme. Then students have all the information, and if different injunctions are used as homework, they will get used to them and the relevant mark schemes. Similarly, an evaluate question for 12 marks, which focuses on AO1 and AO3, has its own mark scheme. Page 57 of the SAMS, question 15. The marks and AO split that are being used are given on the next slide, and for each of these, you will find an example levels mark scheme in the SAMS, which you can use with your students. This is just about questions with 8 or more marks available. The aim is to make every question in an exam accessible to every student. The assessment objective being tested can, to an extent, be worked out by the injunction. For example, evaluate is likely to be AO1 and AO3. However, it is what is being asked that is the important thing. For example, give one strength of using a case study is AO3 if it asks the candidate to evaluate. The candidate needs to answer the exact question, and in many ways does not need to worry about assessment objectives as such, though it can help to know what each injunction is asking for. And that is why the injunctions are listed and explained in Appendix 6 of the specification. This slide gives a breakdown of the levels-based mark questions and answers. Questions with up to 8 marks are marked in a points-based way. See the SAMS. For points-based marking, students need to know that they have to make a point clearly and effectively, and that each relevant point they make gets a mark. You can use the SAMS to find out more, such as how explain, for 2 marks, has one main point that gets a mark, and a second mark for justifying the point. Explain is in the list of injunctions. Levels-based questions and answers are perhaps a bit harder to work out, though the SAMS have the information. This slide is here to summarize, however, and should be useful. The focus on the SAMS is because question setting must be based on the SAMS. You need to know that if a question has any AO2 and is levels marking, has 8 marks or more, the question will have within it, you must make reference to the context in your answer. Firstly, when levels questions have an element of AO2, 8 marks questions are always just 2 AOs, and are marked giving 4 marks for one of the AOs and 4 marks for the other. With AO2, an 8-mark question has 4 AO1 marks and 4 AO2 marks. With no AO2, an 8-mark question has 4 AO1 and 4 AO3 marks. If there is AO2, you will note from the information in this slide that there are always 4 marks available for the AO2 element. For 12 marks with AO2, which gets 4 marks, the split between AO1 and AO3 is even, 4 AO1 plus 4 AO3. For 16 marks with AO2, which gets 4 marks, AO1 has 6 marks and AO3 has 6 marks, again an even split. For 20 marks, if there is AO2, which gets 4 marks, then the AO1 has 8 marks, and the AO2 has 8 marks, also evenly split. When there is AO2, it has 4 of the marks, and the AO1 and AO3 is evenly split thereafter. Secondly, when levels questions have no AO2. If there is no note to students telling them to use the context, then students know there is no AO2 in the answer. This is for levels marking. In points-based marking, they may well have to respond to short questions about stimulus material, such as a method question. No AO2. For 8 marks, 4 marks are for AO1, and 4 marks are for AO3. For 12 marks, there are 6 AO1 marks and 6 AO3 marks. For 16 marks, the AO1 gets 6 marks and the AO3 gets 10 marks. For 20 marks, the AO1 gets 8 marks and the AO3 gets 12 marks. That is what the chart here is saying, and hopefully it is helpful. It does not take long to grasp these figures, and they are illustrated in the SAMs. The 16 and 20 mark answers are in Year 2, and are in Year 2 SAMs. With regard to some ideas about exam writing, here are some that come from previous A-level exams that might help in preparing students. In a 2-part question, where a choice in the first part is then discussed in the second part, be sure to stick to the same idea in both parts. Read the question carefully and only answer the question. Avoid rewording the question as an answer, as this does not actually answer the question. When using terms, make sure the answer clearly shows understanding of the terms. Be specific in an answer, such as not just claiming a study lacks validity because it is an experiment. We could say Pavlov truly measured salivation, for example, even though using a laboratory experiment. Make enough use of the given scenario within answers. Answers should be contextual when there is a scenario, and when material is to be applied. Avoid just referring to a context once in an answer. Expand on an answer that has 2 marks available to avoid getting just one of the marks available. Aim to avoid learning strengths and weaknesses in a rather shorthand form, and so not elaborating in an examination. Be sure to read the question accurately. A candidate is advised to read the question through and then read it again to check that the interpretation is correct, and perhaps read it again after or partway through an answer. For those used to A-level psychology, the usual advice to students should still be useful, such as point, explanation, elaboration, PEE. This is a points-based answer to a question asking, describe one symptom of schizophrenia. It is question 1 of paper 2 in the A-level SAMs. The mark scheme on page 89 of the A-level SAMs, accessed on the Edexcel website, gives the point that is written out here, hallucinations, and shows how the 2 marks are awarded. With regard to this answer, 1 mark is for the point about someone hearing something that does not exist and naming hallucinations. The next sentence, about not distinguishing the hallucination from reality, partly repeats the first point, and it is good to see more being said. The example, thump, is quite good, and linking it to Rosenhan nicely shows understanding of the application. This question has describe as the injunction, which means giving an account and developing it. There is enough for the 2 marks here. This is an example of points-based marking. More about levels marking is given on the following slide. This is a short answer given that there are 8 marks available. This is done so that it can form a short task in this presentation. Levels marking for an 8-mark assess question allocate 4 A01 and 4 A03 marks, as has been discussed earlier. The candidate does not have to write out the A01. It can be drawn from their answer. In this answer, there is some A01 about drug therapy, mentioning clozapine and side effects, but not much about CBT. Clearly, there is a lot of detail missing, but there is enough here to show that there is some knowledge of the 2 treatments. A03 is focused on, with effectiveness given, using evidence, which is good. There is a bit of evaluation of the effectiveness, such as Guo et al.'s 2011, finding out about people not taking medication for schizophrenia. Even in this short answer, you can see that there is material which responds to the question. This answer is just an idea of what an answer might include, to show how levels marking is done. The levels for this 8-mark assess question are found on page 101 of the A-Level SAMS, Paper 2. There is some accurate knowledge and perhaps a partially developed discussion, though of course a candidate would need to write a lot more. This answer is between levels 1 and 2 and might get 3 marks. There would be standardization and so on in real marking, but this hopefully gives you an idea of how levels marking works. If you are using levels marking with your students, always start from the highest level and work down. It is better to see if a candidate has achieved the top level first, to try to give them the highest marks possible. If they do not match the highest level, then try the next one down, and so on. Here is a brief overview of what has been covered in this presentation. The course was explained, giving the structure. The A-Level is over 2 years, with 3 exam papers at the end of that time. The content of Year 2 was discussed, including focusing on the structure, in that each of the 4 Year 2 applications has content, methods, studies, key question and practical investigation. Paper 3, Topic 9, is the Psychological Skills paper, with method, studies, and issues and debates as the 3 parts. Some ideas were offered about teaching issues and debates, a synoptic element of the course. Assessment was explored, looking at A-Level. Some teaching ideas and resources were covered, including the free resources on the Edexcel website. Finally, there was more on assessment, with 2 examples to help make the points. GCSE English subjects and maths are changing first for first teaching in September 2015, with first assessments in summer 2017. GCSE Psychology is scheduled to change in 2017, and you can keep an eye on the Edexcel website to see progress, as well as using the Ofqual website to look at the subject content once it is decided. GCEs for a range of subjects, including psychology, as you know, are changing first for first teaching in September 2015, with first assessments in summer 2017. Other subjects are in the next phase of changes. We constantly look to improve the delivery of our training and appreciate all delegate feedback. Delegates will soon receive an email directing them to our online feedback form. The form takes no more than a couple of minutes to complete. please ask them to take the time to let us know their thoughts by filling in this short form.